Hi, everybody. My name is Linda Bazans, and I am a grateful member of the Al-Anon family group. It is really a privilege to be here. This is a great place. There's incredible energy in this room. Probably all sorts of wonderful people who have passed through here and grown up here, I guess. It just feels really comfy, cozy. I have never been to Rhode Island before, and I fell in love with it today and yesterday. It is, wow. Now, God gave us some great weather, but it is just beautiful here. The foliage is really similar to what we have I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota, and it's a little bit similar in foliage. I think we're a little bit ahead of you in color. I think we've turned a little bit redder. I know. Is that better? Is that going to be better? Okay, thank you. I think we're a little bit ahead of you in color, but I love the smell of the ocean. And I love looking out and seeing and I've had so many beautiful glimpses, and I've eaten such great food, and so, it's going to be hard to go home. But anyway, it's just wonderful to be here, and it's a privilege for me to share this program with you. It's interesting that I say that, because for many years I kicked and screamed and didn't really want to be here. So my job tonight is to tell you what it was like, what happened to me, and what it's like today. I was born and raised in Oak Park, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. And I feel sort of like a midget here. I don't know why. I'm an only child, and I didn't like being an only child. I always felt like I was singled out. You're an only child, you must be spoiled. I also didn't like the fact that it was sort of dull around our house. It was Mom and Dad and me. And there wasn't a lot of activity. And most of my friends had 2 to 4 to 6 siblings. And so there was a lot of activity in their home. And I always wanted to be there. I always loved the activity. And so I didn't really like being an only child. My mother was a seamstress, and she made most of my clothes, and I really had lovely clothes, and I didn't like it. People would say, "Oh, did your mother make it?" I think actually what they were saying, they really liked what I had because my mother made it. I didn't hear that. I thought, my mother made it. And my mother really made beautiful things. I look back on that, and it was what a wonderful gift. The other gift I was given by my parents was the gift of a constant comment to me of what a blessing I was to them. How much they enjoyed me, how much they liked me, how much having me around increased or enhanced the moment. And it wasn't until many, many years later that a wise woman pointed out to me that that was such a blessing. To have that platform to grow up, that you are just special. And I didn't know that. But boy, that's a nice way to grow up. It's a nice thing to have underneath you. So anyway, I'm a young kid, an only child. I'm born and raised Catholic. Went to a Catholic grade school, and later on went to a Catholic high school. Somewhere along the line, probably I think at the age of 6, I made a decision that I was going to be a nursing nun. And I know that I made that decision for 2 reasons. One is I really liked chemistry, and I liked the idea of taking care of people, and nursing fascinated me from the very beginning. And I also remember seeing pictures of these nuns, and I believe they were in Africa, and they had these headdresses, these white things that sort of came out of their... And I always kiddingly say that I think I have it connected or a little bit mixed up with the flying nun, but either way, I remember these, and I remember thinking, that's what I want to do. I want to be a person who dedicates my life to taking care of the ill. And so I sort of started to make decisions that would support that decision. And when it came time for me to go to college, I went to a Catholic girls' high school, and when it came time for me to go to college, I made a decision that I wanted to go to a Catholic girls' college. And my father lost his job when I was a junior in high school, and they were trying to figure out how they could make it happen that I would go away to school. But my father went away to school, and he said, I really felt I grew up the most my first year away, and I really want you to have that opportunity. And I think they probably saw some dependency on them, being the only kid in the house. And either way, you're going away your first year. After that, if we can't afford it, you can come back and finish going to school in the Chicago area. And so I started looking for schools, and one of the main reason I chose the College of St. Catherine's, which is in St. Paul, Minnesota, is because it was the only Catholic girls' college that had no summer curriculum. And I really felt that I had some responsibility to earn some money during that summer to help pay for what was going on in college. I look back on that, and I thought I made such a wonderful contribution. I think I bought my clothes. But either way, I did work, and I did feel like I was on board and, part of the team. So I went to the College of St. Catherine in St. Paul, Minnesota, after visiting it in February and falling in love with it on a very bleak February day, and started my nursing career. Somewhere in my freshman year, one of my very dear friends, who's a dear friend of mine today, said to me, would you like to go out on a blind date? And we did a lot of blind dates. In those days, first of all, if you're at an all-girls school, it sort of works pretty well. And it really wasn't awkward. Now, as soon as I'll say that to people, and they go, oh, a blind date. Well, some of them were scary, but, it wasn't unusual. So I said, sure, I would love to. And so she fixed me up with her cousin, who was home from Notre Dame, and that was Bob. And we had a really, really good time. Or I thought we did. And he didn't ask me out again. And I was sort of surprised by that, because I thought if you have a good time, they usually have a good time. Wouldn't you repeat that? Well, I guess not. And that was the end of that. And it was, it wasn't something that haunted me or something that really upset me, but it was one of those things, probably the beginning of many puzzlements. But it was a puzzlement. And again, we're both getting to the age where we can hardly remember how long the time was, and it isn't important. But probably a good 9 or 10 months later, we ran into each other at a party. It was, I look back on my college experience even before Bob, but definitely after Bob. And we had a lot of things that we did, but they were always focused on drinking. This particular day, it was a Viking football game, but drinking was what we were doing at this apartment while watching the Viking football game. So I went into the kitchen. I recognized him immediately upon entering the room. I had a date. He had a date. Later on, I went into the kitchen, and Bob was the bartender. And he asked me what I would like to drink. And I told him. And he said to me, haven't I met you somewhere before? And I said, yes, I know. I said, yes, you have, and I left the room. And I'm going to cut to the chase on this. Of course, we started dating thereafter. And I look back on our dating career time. I use the word courtship, and the first time, I just used that last weekend, and I remember thinking, that's a word you just don't hear anymore. But we courted, or we had a courtship, and it was rocky. It was rocky. We had a lot. We did a lot of fighting, and the fighting always centered around he was either drinking too much or driving too fast. And those were the two things that really scared me. And I was drinking too. It wasn't like he was the only one drinking. But I was living in a dormitory, and he would drop me off after the date, and he would go out and continue drinking, and I would, go home. But boy, there were many, many times when I had too much to drink. So drinking was definitely part of what we were doing. So we became engaged, and this is a story that It's a silly story, but it's an important story, and you're going to hear it. We went to a wedding, and it was one of my friends got married. It was at the VA, or at the Officers Club, and they had, Bob would bring back 1 drink for me and 2 drinks for him. And when he did it the second time, I said to him, how come you get 2 drinks and I get 1? And he said, well, it's an open bar. And I said, see, to me, if it's an open bar, you can have all you want and you wouldn't have to do that. And I said, yeah? And he said, well, the bar might close. And the reason that is an important story for me is that was one of the first times I remember taking a piece of information that made absolutely no sense to me and incorporating it into my being and saying it was okay. And the reason that's important to me is that's what I think Al-Anonism is about. We get lost in your disease. We give up pieces of ourselves inch by inch, death by 1,000 cuts. Just a teeny little bit, peace at all cost, pat down, make it all okay. And before we know it, we don't know who we are any longer. And that's what happened to me, and I think that's what happens to Al-Anon. People do not come to Al-Anon because they want to. They come to Al-Anon because they've run out of their last good idea. And it's the only reason we come. Because we want to make you behave. And we want to make you behave because you're very inconvenient. You are. We love you, but your disease is tough, and it's tough on us. And that's what Al-Anon looks like. So anyway, that summer, we were engaged in March. We were to be married in December. And that summer, I was driving Bob to meetings. They were business meetings that he told me about. And I was driving because he lost his license again. And, the police in West St. Paul were really tough. I mean, it wasn't his fault. I knew that. I mean, he told me that. It was the police. And, but I believed it, of course, So I'm driving him to meetings, and my roommate at the time, the meetings were in basements of churches and unusual places for business meetings. And my roommate said, she said, Linda, she said, either he's lying to you and those aren't business meetings, or his business isn't doing very well. And one more time, I said, oh, no, of course they're business meetings. So after, I don't know, again, the timing isn't important, but after several weeks of this, he said to me, those meetings that you're driving me to, those are not business meetings. And I said, they're not. And he said, no, they're meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, oh my gosh, that's wonderful. Now that is not a normal reaction. Now I have to tell you one more part about this story. I am now a psychiatric nurse. Well, I found out later on I didn't like sick people very well, but I liked people that I could just talk to them. And I really loved psychiatric nursing. But I was also working on an alcoholic treatment ward at the psychiatric hospital. So don't expect much. That's what I was doing. And he said to me, those are not business meetings, those are meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, wow, that's wonderful. If I did not think down deep inside of me that there was a problem, that would not have been my response. That is not a normal response for a 21-year-old to say. It just isn't. But I was delighted, because somewhere down there I knew he needed that. So the second or third meeting, he said to me, the wives meet in the basement on Wednesday night. And I thought that was great. I said something like, that's wonderful. Now, I'm not married. I'm 21 years old. I don't know. I just said, that's great. I'm glad they're meeting there. And the second week, he said, the wives are meeting in the basement. And the third week, I said, why do you keep telling me that? Do you want me to go? And he said, I think it would be a good idea. Now, I have one character defect or asset, depending on how you want to look at it, and it's called looking good. Looking good has always been very important to me. Behaving well has been important to me. I think I was a good student because I never wanted to get in trouble. I never wanted to get singled out. That's probably why this is hard for me, because I am. And so what a good wife to be would do would go to the meetings to support her husband. And that's why I started going to Al-Anon on a Wednesday night in August. And this last August, I celebrated 43 years in Al-Anon. So I'm still going. But I started to go to look good. What would a good woman do to support her husband? I had no interest in the program. I had no interest in the work of the program. I just wanted to look good. And as time went on, I was very resentful for people that didn't have to go. I'd hear of somebody who came in and, their husband is in the program and the wife's not going. Instead of thinking, oh, that's too bad they're not having this experience, that wasn't my reaction. My reaction was, how come they don't have to go and I have to go? So anyway, I started my Al-Anon career, and so I started going to Al-Anon, and about 3 months later we were married. And now you enter a new arena, marriage. And what happens, I think, is when you come to marriage, you have a set of expectations around marriage. You just don't know you have them. And so my expectations around marriage went something like this. My father came home at 5 o'clock every night. He read the mail. Mother and Dad would have a cocktail, sometimes two. Mother would serve dinner at 6, always a well-cooked meal, many times, almost always some lovely dessert. She would meet Dad at the door and kiss him, and they would say hello, and he would read the mail, have the cocktail, have this wonderful dinner. Dad would help her with the dishes many times, and he would say to me, go up and do your homework. The evening would progress. I don't know what they did, but I would be doing homework or on the phone with my friends or whatever I was doing. And the next morning, get up and we'd have a lovely breakfast. I'd go to school. Dad would go to work. It would start all over at 5 o'clock. That's what I thought marriage was going to be. And Bob had a set of expectations around marriage, but we never really shared them. All of a sudden, we're married. My expectations and his were very different. First of all, he never came home at 5 o'clock. I mean, if he ever did, even now it's almost a fluke. There was like no pattern. I couldn't cook. I could broil. I had 3 items I could broil, and I just kept rotating them. I didn't have a white apron, which was part of the picture, too. I didn't bake. I don't even like baked goods that much, but I was too lazy. I was too busy. I was working as a nurse, getting up at 7 o'clock and coming home probably at 4:30, picking out something I could broil, broiling it. He would get home about 6:30, 6:45, go to the 8 o'clock meeting. In those days, the meetings were more like 2 hours long, weren't they? Well, Bob never came home until about 10:30 or 11. But he didn't. He had to stay. And I would be home, and I was getting up at 5:36 to go to work, and so we were sort of like missing each other. But I'm going to Al-Anon, and I'm going to Al-Anon to look good. There are steps in Al-Anon that are the same steps that AA has, and we work those steps. Now, I was only working the steps that I liked. I'm going to 2 meetings a week. I'm working the steps that I like, but I'm not telling you that. I'm just working the steps that I like, and I don't like very many of them. One, my life really wasn't unmanageable. I really wasn't powerless. I was, but I didn't know it. Number 2, I was a psychiatric nurse, and there was no insanity here, so don't get that. Number 3, turn my will and life over to God. I don't know. Some days, maybe. 4 and 5. Now, I was raised a Roman Catholic, and I had gone to confession for many a year, and there was no way I was ever doing 4 and 5. End of discussion. In fact, there was no discussion. I didn't tell you that. I just let you think. And as time went on, you started to think that I started to do these steps. 6 and 7, I used to think really were filler steps. I think they probably needed 12, and those two were so similar, and they just sort of put them in there. 8 and 9, I did make a partial list, and I did do some amends, and I did not check them with anybody. I don't think I hurt anybody. I really don't. I look back on that, and I think I could have done some real harm because I had no wisdom or no guidance. I was just, I had to check off some of them, so I could do 9, I guess. And but I really liked 10. And you know what I liked about 10? I thought I could say I was sorry faster than Bob could say he was sorry. And later on, one of my sponsors said to me, would you point to where the word sorry is? I just want you to point to that word in there. And, of course, it's not in that. It is not in step 10. It says when you were wrong. And she said to me, you will no longer say sorry. She said, it's very easy for you to say you're sorry. It's just pushing everything under the carpet or patting everything back together. She said, from now on you will say, I was wrong. And I'm telling you, the difference between I'm sorry, which was just glib and easy, to I'm wrong was like being kicked in the solar plexus. Very, very important distinction for me. But anyway, so you can tell what kind of program I'm working. Again, 11, conscious contact. I could carry the message. Can you imagine the message that I had to carry? Now, I went to meetings, I have to admit, for 7 years with that going on in my life. And what happens is I became sick and sicker, and I just became such a phony, and I became miserable. I had a sponsor at the time, and I had a good sponsor, and I think I had exactly the right sponsor. If she had been too rough with me, it would have been my invitation to leave. And I think Jen knew that. I really think she knew that. She just handled me with kindness and with gentleness. And, I'm doing things in the group, and I'm taking steps, and I'm reading the literature, but I'm just not doing the steps. I'm just not doing the deal. And at this point, now I have to also say, we have sobriety in our home. Bob is sober. It's hard to go to meetings and complain about the fact that your husband goes to too many meetings. It's hard to go to those meetings and say how hard it is at home when I'm looking at people whose lights are turned off and who are having abuse in their family. And I'm upset because all he does is do AA. You know what? I just couldn't, those words just wouldn't come out. And yet, that's what was killing me. Because we had sobriety in our house, but you know what? We had alcoholism in our house. And alcoholism, the disease, was alive and well. We had a lot of unmanageability. We had a lot of arguments. In this 7 years, we ended up having 2 little boys. And I'm working, and I am an unhappy person. I'm angry, and I'm resentful. And I'm going to 2 Al-Anon meetings a week. And I'm not working the steps, and I'm just festering is what's happening to me. I'm just a mess. We're going to all these meetings, and we always have to sit in the front row. And I want to sit not even in the back row. I basically want to be out of the room. The speaker starts talking, and I am so fragile at this point. I am very, very close to tears most of the time. And you want to look good, and I'm sitting in the front row, but I'm eaten up. I'm a phony, and I'm not doing the deal, and I don't know. I'm not in a good place, I'll tell you. This particular day, we got home from a meeting, and I believe it was a Sunday. And I just started to cry, and I said, what's wrong with me? I don't know what's wrong. I'm dying. I'm just dying. And Bob said to me, and if he had said it at any other time, I don't think I would have heard it. He said, honey, it's not a smorgasbord. why don't you work the steps in the order they were written? And if he had said that at any other time, I would have come back with something cute, like, you work your program, or you stay out of my program, or don't take my inventory. I learned those remarks. And that particular day, I knew the jig was up. I had to either fish or cut bait. Either quit this and just be done with it, or really step up and become a member of Al-Anon. And thank God I became a member of Al-Anon. I called Jen, and in those days we didn't take steps with our sponsors. 5. We didn't do that. We did it with clergy or other people. And Jen, I called her, and she said, I want you to make an appointment tomorrow. She gave me some numbers, and she said, I'd like you to make the appointment for 3 weeks. She said, if you wait too much longer, you'll procrastinate, and if you do it too soon, you won't do a thorough job. And now you know I have to do a thorough job, because this is going to be the best 4th and 5th step anyone has ever taken, because I am never doing this again. So I made it next day. And I had 2 requirements. One, it had to be a woman, and the other one was a woman I would never, ever, ever have a chance of seeing again in my life. So the next day I found a woman, and she knew what I was doing, and we made an appointment. And 3 weeks later, I took my 4th step during that time, and I took a 5th step. And I left that place that day a new person, because I was no longer a phony. I became real. And I became a member of Al-Anon. So my life changed. And what happened because of the 4th and 5th step, I think it took me 7 years to surrender. I was either going to give up or I had to do the deal. And again, thank God. Al-Anon has been my parachute, and it's been my anchor. It has taught me who I am. It has given me the tools to live with life. And all I wanted were tips on how to make him behave. And you never gave them to me, but you gave them to me freely and willingly. And they're the steps. But they're supposed to be applied to you. And I didn't want to do the work. I wanted it to be okay, but I didn't want to do the work. So what happened is my life started to change, and God opened my heart. And I became willing, and I became a member, and I became a giver, and I became a blessing to people. And I remember during those 7 years, I said to Jen, how come no one's asked me to be their sponsor? And she said, because you have nothing that they want. But you know what? It didn't offend me. I was like, yeah, I got it. I have nothing that they want. And she was right on. I have had the most wonderful women. I stand on the shoulders of hundreds of women, but 3 of them in particular. One's name was Jen, and she was my sponsor for 23 years. And 6 years prior to her passing, she died in 1990, she quit going to Al-Anon. And she told me it was about a resentment, and she said, and that's all I'm saying. And Jen was a real German. And when Jen made up her mind, she made up her mind. Now, she was always my sponsor. But I had been taught by her that you were supposed to have a sponsor who had a sponsor, who attended meetings, who worked the steps, and who was active in service. Well, all of a sudden, what I've been taught has been broken. So I don't have a sponsor who goes to meetings. I kept going to meetings, and she was my sponsor until she died. At that time, I didn't know she would be dying that quickly, but she did die in 1990. But on that occasion, all of a sudden, I'm not doing the deal the way I'm taught to do the deal. So I asked a woman in Texas by the name of Marcy to be my sponsor. So for 7 years, I had 2 sponsors. And Jen died in 1990 of cancer. And I had Marcy for the next 11 years. And Jen was my main person, but I think in many ways Marcy brought me to a whole new level of my program. She was just this incredibly kind, wise, just a wonderful woman. And I loved her, and she taught me, and she loved me. One of the things that, there were so many, but one of them that I like to talk about is I was a person who always wanted to know why. And it wasn't why for a curiosity reason. It was, why me? Why is this happening to me? And Marcy said to me, you ask why a lot. She said, we're going to eliminate that from your vocabulary. And I actually said, why? And we laughed. And she said, because, darling, or precious, actually, is who I was. I was precious. She said, because, precious, why makes you a victim, and what can I do about it makes you a person in action. And she said, it's very easy for you to ask why, and you're stuck. So she said, you will absolutely wean that from your vocabulary. And I've done a really good job. I really don't ask why very often. So that was one of the nuggets that incredible woman gave me. In 2001, Marcy died. And here I am, I call it rudderless again. And I said to God, could you please, I just, you know how you run through people and you look at people at your meeting and you're starting, and nothing happened. Nothing sort of clicked. And I needed a sponsor because that's part of my deal. I have to have a sponsor. And so I said to God, could I please know who the person is? Could you just put that person in my mind? And could I please know by Christmas? I just don't want to be without a sponsor that long. And well, he or she did. It worked. About the middle of October, I woke up literally early in the morning thinking about a woman named Beverly R. from Fort Worth. And about 9 o'clock I was thinking about her, and about 10 o'clock I was thinking about her, and about noon I was thinking about her, and about 2 o'clock I went, I got it. And I called her and I asked her if she'd be my sponsor. And she's been my sponsor to this day. And she's a wonderful woman, and she's a Texan, and I like that connection a lot. I like the softness and their gentleness, but they're tough. I mean, they work good programs, and so she's my sponsor today. So what's my life like now? Well, I have no idea what it would be like without Al-Anon. I've grown up here. This is my place. I have become a person who's responsible in my own life. I do not blame what happens to me on Bob's alcoholism, which I did before in those 7 years. Everything that went wrong was because of him. Not because of him, but because of his alcoholism. It was a great place to blame. And Jen said to me, we're going to look at you pre-Bob. We're going to look at your own brand of craziness that you brought into this marriage. And once I started to do that, things shifted. It was easy to blame. He was out there. He looked more unmanageable. I have to look good, don't forget. So I became responsible in my own life. I'm active in my own group. I work the steps on a daily basis. I work the first 5 steps on being able to do this tonight. And Marcy taught me that. She said, because I don't like speaking in front of crowds. I just don't like it. And she said, look at the unmanageability. Look at the powerlessness. Look what's happening. Then look at your insanity and know that you have that God will restore you to saneness and wholeness and wellness and order. And then turn the whole experience over to your higher power and know that you'll be taken care of, and know that you'll say the right thing and that you'll talk to the people you need to talk to. And then she said, do an inventory. And the first question I always ask when I do that, it's a mini one, it's not like I'm doing a lot of writing, but the first question I ask is, how is my pride involved? And I'll tell you, I've never not been able to answer that question, because my pride, I want to look good. I want you to like me. I want to be eloquent. I want to be incredible. I want to be humble. I just want to look good. And then I get down on my knees and I turn the experience over. And then I always say to some person, I'm really nervous. And then I get up and do what I'm supposed to do. And it has made an incredible difference. I used to not be able to get up here and even have a water or a piece of paper without it, shaking. And if I were standing, I was afraid I'd fall down because I held my body so rigidly that I was literally afraid I'd fall off the podium. And that has all gone away. And I believe it's because I do it that way. I sponsor people. I have a sponsor. The people I sponsor give me as much as I ever give them. And that, as you know, goes back and forth. Sometimes they're sponsoring me and sometimes I'm sponsoring them. But I have wonderful women that I work with and that are just an integral part of my life. Every year I do a New Year's resolution around my program. And that's really important to me. Probably about 15 or 20, more like 20 years ago, I was talking to Marcia about it. And I said, I put all my books on the table. And I sort of read them every morning. And I find that I'm reading them to get them out of the way. I make a deal that I'm going to read the books, so as soon as I've read them, then I've done them. And I said, that doesn't seem very vital. I feel like I'm losing my connection. I feel like I'm becoming complacent. And she said, well, one of the things I do is I do a New Year's resolution around my program every year. I said, tell me about that. And so she gave me some examples, and she said, I have one idea. She said, why don't we do, she said, one of the things I do is step a month. So January you're on one, and February you're on two. And I said, oh, that sounds great. I'll do that with you. And she said, okay. Well, all of a sudden it became April. And I wasn't really looking forward to doing another fourth and fifth step, so I have to tell you I quit. I did not do it the first year. However, the second year I did follow through and do a step a month and completed the year. And every year I do a New Year's resolution around my program. And one particular year, I am also German. And it was like the 6th of January. Now, I did not have a New Year's resolution, and I was not pleased. I should have it on the 1st, and I should be implementing it already. And it's the 6th, and I said, I happen to be in Texas. And I said to Marcia, I don't have a resolution yet. And she said, oh, that's all right, Precious. You'll have one soon. I said, no, I want one now. She said, don't worry. It'll be fine. You'll know. Well, within about 2 days, I was talking to a friend, and she had a friend who had just passed away of an aneurysm. It was a gentleman, and 1 minute he was here, and the next minute he was gone. And we had a friend who had the same sort of thing had happened. She and her husband had been walking along a path on a May Day, and she had been hit by a car and fallen into his arms and died. She was like 45. And so I said to Amelia, the friend I was talking to, I said, we have that wonderful phrase or slogan, a day at a time. And I said, if we really, really lived a day at a time, I bet our lives would be different. So we made a deal that we would do it for a week, and then we would check back and see what had happened. It was incredible. We both reported this incredible world opening up, this sense of wonder at every single moment. And so my New Year's resolution was born. And I was like dynamite until March. And all of a sudden it was June, and I forgot all about it. It is the hardest thing for me to do, is to live a day at a time. And so I renew that every single year. When I do it, I am caught up in the wonder of the moment. Like this moment will never, ever be repeated. The same people will never be in this room again. The day that we had today was incredible. And it'll never happen that same way again. And I love it when I do it, and yet it is the hardest thing for me to hold on to and stay with. And it's amazing to me that it can be so incredibly important and so almost impossible at some times. I don't know what that is, but I know a lot of people share that with me, and I really, really, really want to stay in the moment, because this moment will never be here again, and it's just incredibly wonderful. And I've given up so many moments of my life to worry and minutia, and I just don't want to give them up anymore, and yet I cannot hold that very long. But I'm still committed to it, and so I'm just going to keep trying to do it and remembering. When I do it well, I don't count the number of things you have in your line or in your basket when you're in the 10 or under checkout line. I mean, I just see everything so much more clearly. And yet I am so able to go back to it that it just keeps astonishing me. Okay, enough of that. I am a person of gratitude today. I am so incredibly grateful for my life. We have issues in our lives which we all have. But when I stay in the wonder of the moment, when I stay in the gratitude, and when I stay in the steps, and when I stay connected to you, it's all okay. We have 3 sons, and they're all men, and they're all members of Alcoholics Anonymous. When I came to Al-Anon, I had no idea that I would be continuing to go to Al-Anon for 3 young men. And I'll tell you one thing, for me, not that I didn't want to always be married to Bob, because I love him to pieces today, and I had always wanted that, but there was always that sense that if it got too bad, I could always leave. But when it's your kids, boy, does it change. The perspective changes. And all of a sudden, we got this one, and he's starting to look pretty alcoholic. And we have him evaluated, and anyway, long and short of it, I have so much gratitude. I can't stay here very long because I get too teary, but Bill is 41 years old, and this last August he celebrated 23 years of sobriety. He came when he was 18 years old. He was starting to go to school at UT, University of Texas in Austin, and I mean, I just couldn't imagine he'd stay sober, and he's sober. And then we have another son, and he's 38 years old. And boy, if we thought we had fun with Bill, Peter really gave us a lot more interesting things to look at. And, I mean, you know, if it weren't for AA, he'd be either dead or in prison. There's just no doubt about it. Probably dead, and maybe have hurt other people. And last January, he had 19 years. And then we have our third son, and he's 11 years younger than the oldest, 9 years younger than Peter. And, oh boy, when he started to look funny, I'm shaking my fist. I'm like, there is no way. Come on. Come on. Not 3 out of 3. This just cannot happen. And you know what it was more about? I couldn't believe we'd be lucky enough that we'd have another recovery. And I was so filled with fear. I mean, it was anger, but it was mostly fear. How could we have another one? Come on. Could we have another recovery? And Danny had 12 years in May. So they came in at 17, 18, and 19. And they are incredible men. I mean, we have like a walking meeting whenever we go anywhere. And our relationship with them is, you can't even describe it, and it's totally because of these steps. I'm telling you, if I have an argument with one of the kids, within 20 minutes, either they're calling me or I'm calling them, and one of us is saying, you know, I was really wrong here. And that's the way we live our lives. And they're wonderful men. I am so grateful to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I cannot tell you. If it weren't for your giving us your steps and your program, I've heard people say, you know, if it weren't for you, we wouldn't need the steps. I needed the steps. and I need them today. And it has absolutely nothing to do with Bob's drinking, alcoholism, or our kids' alcoholism or drug use. It's because I need the steps to live. And I thank you so much for giving them so freely to us. I don't know who I'd be without them. So I am so grateful. You've given me tools to live my life. I'm a different person. I try really hard to have a sense of humor. I take myself too seriously, but I am getting better. I have a much better sense of humor than I used to. I try really hard to be gentle, and I try really hard to mind my own business. That has been one of the most important things for me. I used to think that I had about probably 50 to 100 pieces of business that were mine every day. And what that did was I was constantly meddling in someone else's stuff. And I have to learn what's my own business. And I have it boiled down to pretty much three things. Three things. One of them is my attitude toward life. I bring every day my attitude to the day, and that's my business. The other one, and the most important, actually the number one, is my relationship with my God. How I start my day, how I live my day, how I show up in my day, how I treat you in my day. And the third one is the things that I bring and put into my body. And that doesn't just include good food. It includes clean air and good thoughts and no gossip. And I don't like to read or be around bad language, violence in any form that I can, eliminate. And so those are the three things that I have control over. And if I stay in those three things, not only am I better, but you're happier. And I'm happier. I'm happier. For many, many years, I was very, very embarrassed about the first 7 years of my recovery. But you know what? I needed those 7 years to become who I am. And I count them in my recovery because I went to meetings, and like I told you, my step work wasn't quite up to snuff, but I still went to meetings. And I am grateful now for my story. So my story in my own time. I want to close with a line from a Broadway play. The play is called Les Miserables. And when I first saw it, in the closing scene, all the characters are singing a song. And one of the lines is, "When you love another person, then you see the face of God." And when I heard that, I just started to weep. I had a real physical reaction to that. And I believe that's what happens to me in this program. Every single day, I get glimpses of God through you. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.